The story kicks off at school, where Akira Tachibana is resting in an empty classroom. Her phone rings, reminding her it's time to head to work. Just as she's about to gather her things and leave, a classmate shows up and awkwardly tries to ask for her number. He's being super persistent, claiming their meeting was fate. But let's be real, he just tracked her down. Despite his endless chatter, she leaves him mid-sentence because she's running late for work. Now, about her job. She works at a place called Garden Cafe, where she's a waitress alongside other staff members, including one who constantly looks grumpy, as if life itself annoyed her. She goes about serving the customers like any regular waitress, though she might have mixed up some orders. Then, she spots her boss, Masami Kondo, apologizing to a customer. This makes grumpy waitress even more irritated because, in her eyes, it made the boss look pathetic. Kondo is naturally pretty mild-mannered, so when he tries to scold the chef, Ryosuke, for burning a customer's food, he does it so gently that it's almost comical. Ryosuke, in return, casually tells him his fly is open. Ouch! Poor Kondo is humiliated, but Akira seems to like his awkward, soft-hearted ways. Later, on her break, she goes to the office, still beaming from when Kondo had spoken to her earlier. She opens the door and unexpectedly finds a kid inside. Confused, she asks grumpy waitress who the boy is, and learns it's Kondo's son, Yuto. Shocked, Akira accidentally drops a plate. When Kondo shows up to check on the noise, she's clearly taken aback by the revelation that her boss has a son. During her break, Yuto starts playing the flute badly, which annoys his dad, who reminds him they're in a restaurant, not a concert hall. Apparently, the kid needs to practice for his graduation exam. Kondo returns to work, leaving Yuto to his flute, but Akira steps in to stop him from playing too loudly, knowing it would bother his dad. 15 minutes later, the silence is unusual, so Kondo checks in on Yuto. Turns out, he's outside with Akira, who's teaching him how to play better. Kondo is surprised to see his son smiling for once, and shyly thanks Akira for looking after him. She brushes it off, saying it's no problem. Later, grumpy waitress is still grumbling about how pathetic Kondo is, bringing up how his wife left him and that he's now a divorced 45-year-old. Meanwhile, Akira is so thrilled that she accidentally breaks another plate. The next day at school, Akira is having lunch with her friends, who are busy ogling an older guy named Yamamoto. He's the captain of the soccer team, apparently the hottest guy in school. Akira couldn't care less. When asked what kind of guy she's into, she describes someone who forgets their fly is open, has messy bed hair, and sneezes loudly, all traits that perfectly describe her boss, Kondo. Naturally, her friends think she's joking, because who'd be into a middle-aged guy like that? Feeling embarrassed, Akira heads off by herself. Her friend from the track team, Haruka, catches up with her, concerned about the upcoming tournament and how the team barely made the qualifying time. Haruka wishes Akira could still be on the team, but Akira brushes it off, saying it's going to rain later. Her injured leg can somehow predict the weather. After school, Akira heads back to work and sees Kondo sneezing loudly by the back entrance, and she's clearly smitten. While working, she casually asks a fellow waitress, Yui, what her type is. Yui doesn't find any of the cooks particularly attractive, so Akira teasingly asks her about Kondo. At that moment, Kondo shows up, overhearing Yui say she'd never go for someone like him because he, smells bad. Kondo, ever the gentle soul, doesn't take it personally and quietly makes a note to work on his hygiene and avoid eavesdropping. Later, Akira finds one of Kondo's shirts and, for some reason, starts smelling it, remembering how she first met him on a rainy day. Back then, she had ducked into the cafe to wait out the rain, and Kondo, being the kind person he is, brought her tea without even asking. He even did a little magic trick to make her laugh. That's when her interest in him first sparked. Just as she's reminiscing, Kondo walks in and catches her smelling his shirt, but he doesn't say anything, and she pretends nothing happened. At the end of her shift, it starts raining again. Kondo, being the nice guy he is, lends umbrellas to his employees. He even tries to give one to Akira, but surprise, she's already got her own. As she's about to leave, Kondo hands her a piece of paper with her schedule for next month. As he types it into the computer, Akira slowly moves closer, startling him. She's about to ask if he has a messaging app like Line, but he doesn't get the hint. Frustrated, she drops the subject and leaves. Takashi, the persistent guy who keeps asking for her number, pops up again, but Akira dodges him like a ninja. On her way home, she can't help but think about how Kondo's shirt smelled. I guess love really doesn't care about age, huh? Another day at work, Kondo introduces a new part-timer in the kitchen, and guess who it is? Yup, it's Takashi, the guy who won't stop chasing after Akira. While Takashi's busy trying to impress Yui, Akira is just rolling her eyes. Takashi even starts cooking orders with all his love for Yui, and it's super cringe. But hey, to each their own. Kondo, meanwhile, notices Takashi is from the same school as Akira and starts imagining there might be something going on between them. His reaction is so awkward it freaks out Yui, but Akira seems to find it charming. After that, since there weren't many customers that day, Yui suggested playing a game with Tachibana where they'd each say things they liked. Yui only mentioned sweet things, while Tachibana said pretty normal stuff. However, she started thinking about what really made her heart race, and you know who came to mind, right? A 45-year-old man. Anyway, when the game ended, she went to clear the table of a customer who had just left and noticed they had forgotten their phone. She took it to her boss, Kondo, who tried to catch the customer at the door, but they were already too far away. That's when Tachibana calculated that if the light turned red, she could catch up with the customer, who was on a bike. As soon as the light turned, she grabbed the phone from Kondo's hand and sprinted off. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Takashi was asking the other staff about Tachibana, which was a bit strange since they were classmates. All he really knew was that she was fast. They told him it was weird she wasn't in the track team anymore, and Takashi explained that she used to be, but she quit after getting injured 6 months ago. After finishing his story, Tachibana had already returned the phone to the customer, but as she came back to Kondo, she collapsed, unable to stand. Worried, Kondo quickly informed the staff that he was stepping out for a bit, not even caring that Takashi had just broken a bunch of plates. The most important thing to him now was getting his car and taking Tachibana to the hospital. Since she couldn't stand on her own, he gently lifted her by the waist and helped her into the car. While in the car, Tachibana mentioned a clinic she had been going to, so Kondo drove her there. Despite her situation, she was happy that her boss was treating her so kindly. At the clinic, Kondo was visibly worried, watching her closely to check if her foot was okay. She got embarrassed and asked if he shouldn't head back to work. She also told him she wouldn't be able to come in for her shift, so Kondo said he'd send her clothes with Takashi, assuming they were dating. Akira quickly denied that with a loud no in the doctor's office. Kondo apologized for the misunderstanding, and she told him she'd pick up her stuff later. For now, she insisted he return to the cafe since the staff was waiting for him. After Kondo left, the doctor apologized to Tachibana, thinking she didn't want to show her scar to anyone, though she really didn't mind. Later, when she went to pick up her things, she said goodbye to Yui, asking her to thank Kondo on her behalf. As she was leaving, she took a moment to look at the window and reflect on the age gap between her and Kondo. Wow, I really do have a thing for older men, she thought. Back home, she rested in her room, replaying how Kondo had carried her to the car, feeling all kinds of emotions. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. To her surprise, it was Kondo calling to check on her leg. He mentioned he'd schedule her shifts once she was better, and that she could call him if she needed anything. Now that she had his number saved, her heart raced again. The next morning, Tachibana spent the day resting. She was so bored that she considered going to a store to buy something. Before leaving, she glanced at Kondo's contact, remembering she could call him if she needed anything. On her way to the store, she unexpectedly ran into her favorite adult, Kondo. He told her he was about to call her because he got lost trying to find her house. Since she had gotten injured during her shift, he felt responsible and wanted to apologize to her family. Akira was happy to see him and told him that her mom was at work, so Kondo invited her out to eat. He mentioned he should have called her before coming over, but Akira told him not to worry, it wasn't his fault. Kondo, however, still thought she didn't want him coming to her house. During their meal, Kondo asked how her leg was doing. When she said it was fine, he checked under the table and noticed her toenails were painted. He thought the red was from an injury, so she explained it was just a pedicure. Kondo, not knowing what that was, needed a little explanation. To be fair, it's not surprising he didn't know. He even made a silly joke, saying her nails must have turned red from blood blisters, which made her laugh because it made no sense. It was the first time Kondo had seen her so relaxed, and he figured it was because she was in casual clothes. After grabbing drinks, Kondo commented that there must be lots of part-time jobs in her neighborhood, wondering why she chose to work at Garden. For Akira, there was no better place to work because he was there. She blurted out that she liked him, and Kondo, completely oblivious, thanked her for the compliment, thinking she had disliked him before. He smoothly dodged her confession. Of course, that's a normal reaction, no one wants to get into trouble over a high schooler. Akira was a bit frustrated, wondering what that thanks even meant. Did he expect her to confess in a different way? Nope, girl, he's just avoiding jail time. Back at school on Monday, Akira was still thinking about what happened and wanted to ask her friends for advice, but then backed out. Her friends noticed she seemed off, assuming it was because of her leg. Later that day, she ran into a track team member who was going to compete in the next tournament. The girl said she didn't feel as fast as Tachibana used to be, which led Akira to visit the track team for a bit of nostalgia. There, she reunited with her friend Haruka, who welcomed her warmly. Although Akira only came to watch, memories of her time on the team came rushing back, and it became too much for her. Before leaving, her friends invited her out to eat after practice, but she declined, mentioning she was busy with her part-time job. Her friends couldn't believe someone as straightforward as Akira would work at a family restaurant, so they planned to visit her cafe. Akira quickly apologized for yelling and made up an excuse about the cafe being too far. Walking home in the rain, she remembered the day she got injured during practice. She had been pushing herself too hard, knowing her leg wasn't in great shape, and collapsed just a few meters into the run. That was the end of her running career. She had been taken to the hospital, where the doctor told her, right in front of her mother, that she'd never run again. Now, all she could do was watch her teammates practice, filled with sadness, until she met Kondo. On one rainy day, Kondo noticed Akira standing outside in the rain. Concerned as her boss, he invited her inside. But she stood there, unmoving, and confessed her feelings. Now, imagine being 45 years old, and a high school girl tells you she likes you. Yeah, that's the kind of moment where you consider turning yourself in. Kondo, like anyone in his position, was left speechless. On his drive home, he replayed her words over and over, realizing how hard it would be to move past this. The next day at work, Kondo was unsure how to act around Akira. When she greeted him like normal, he figured maybe the whole thing had been a dream. Part of him felt disappointed, as if nothing had happened. He even suspected Takashi might have been playing a prank with hidden cameras. No way could a 17-year-old girl actually like an old guy like him, right? Maybe she just wanted him to take care of her. Still, something about the whole situation made him uncomfortable, especially when they were alone in the office during her break. Just then, Yui burst into the office to invite Akira to karaoke with the staff to celebrate Takashi joining the team. Akira, sounding annoyed, said she didn't want to go because she didn't like karaoke. Yui, who had interrupted at a bad time, was on the verge of tears, thinking Akira hated her. Akira then explained it was because of her leg, which Yui understood. Kondo, now unsure whether the whole confession was a dream or not, offered to drive Akira to the station later that day so she wouldn't put too much strain on her leg. He still wanted to talk to her about the whole situation, so when it was time to head home, she got into the passenger seat, all excited, thinking he was finally going to give her a proper answer. But, as they were driving, Kondu told her that he really couldn't give her an answer, for obvious reasons. He pointed out that he was 45 years old, and what would people think? Something that didn't bother her at all, even though he could easily be her father. She bluntly replied, "But you're not my dad." Despite all the reasons he gave her for why it couldn't work, she shouted that she liked him. This, of course, made him super nervous, and she seemed a little shaken, probably because she didn't want to be rejected. They got out of the car to get some fresh air, and since it was raining, they found shelter under a tree to continue their conversation about this, let's say, forbidden topic. First, he asked why she liked him, which totally confused her, because she had never really thought about the why. He told her that in his case, there should be some reason, but she just said, "I like you," without any deep explanation. Kondu was trying to wrap his head around the situation, standing next to a 17-year-old girl who was confessing her feelings for him. He flashed back to his younger self and imagined approaching Tachibana back then. Snapping back to reality, he told her that she should really think things through. After all, he was 45, with no dreams or hopes left, just a middle-aged guy who felt empty. That made her laugh. She thought it was funny that he called himself a guy. She told him, laughing, that he didn't get it. He'd freak out if they actually went on a date together. When she heard the word date, she got all excited and asked if they were really going on one. Oops. Kondu had definitely dug himself into a hole there. Hello, potential prison sentence. Tachibana took his words very literally and now fully expected a date. In class, she couldn't stop thinking about it, daydreaming about going out with him. Kondu had posted the new employee schedules in the office, and Tachibana noticed that they both had a day off at the same time. She reminded him about the date he had supposedly promised, not letting him explain that it was just an example. She asked if Saturday would work for him, and she insisted so much that he couldn't refuse. Once she confirmed a date, she left the office and ran into Ryosuke, who was on the phone with someone asking about private lessons. After he hung up, he let her use the sink. While Tachibana was washing up, Ryosuke started checking her out. When she left to get back to work, he asked if the high school girl he was going to tutor was cute. It turned out to be a guy, which killed his enthusiasm for teaching. Back in the kitchen, Ryosuke started paying more attention to Tachibana, describing her as a high school girl and imagining what it would be like to be with her. But he quickly realized there was no chance, plus she seemed pretty unapproachable. After making her lunch, he wondered what was making her so happy. When she later sat in the office eating, Ryosuke came in for his break and noticed she was already studying. Before she went back to work, he borrowed her textbook. When he opened it, he found that she had written inside that she liked the manager. Realizing this, Ryosuke used it as leverage, blackmailing her into going on a date with him. She had no choice but to agree, so they went out on one of her other days off. Even though Ryosuke tried to make conversation, she didn't really pay much attention to him. Then, he tried the classic move, taking her to a horror movie, hoping she'd get scared and cling to him. But, unfortunately for him, she stayed totally calm throughout the film. After the movie, she had to head home, but not before giving him back the money he spent on her. Before he could take it, he offered to treat her to some tea. While they were sitting at the table, Ryosuke brought up what he had heard about her, how she used to be in the track team and was a fast runner but quit after an injury. Tachibana told him it didn't bother her anymore, as she had gotten over it. But as soon as Ryosuke mentioned her boss, she froze. He added salt to the wound by saying that since she couldn't be in the track team anymore, she had just fallen in love with someone. He asked her if it scared her that the person she loved was 45 years old. That made her mad, and she stormed off, but Ryosuke chased after her and grabbed her hand just as she got a call from Kondu. She yelled at Ryosuke to let her go, which he did, and she answered the call. On the phone, Kondu asked about their date and where she'd like to go. Tachibana replied that she'd like to go somewhere he liked, so Kondo told her he'd think of a place. After the call, Tachibana was absolutely thrilled, acting like a girl in love, genuinely happy and excited about the upcoming date. Ryosuke saw her reaction and finally realized that she really did like Kondo. He told her that things wouldn't work out between them and that she should probably look for someone else. Trying to distract her, he pointed at something, and when she looked away, he took the opportunity to kiss her. That, of course, made her furious, and that's how their date ended. When Tachibana got home, she took a shower and replayed the phone call with Kondo in her head. She was happy again but still mad at Ryosuke's words about how things with Kondo wouldn't work out. She wiped off the kiss Ryosuke had given her. Finally, the day of her long-awaited date with her 45-year-old boss arrived. Honestly, is this even legal? Someone call the cops. She showed up way more dressed up than she had been with Ryosuke, her hair styled differently. Kondo immediately noticed how nice she looked. They went to see the same movie she had seen with Ryosuke, but this time it was with Kondo. After the film, Kondo asked her what she thought of it. She simply said it was a good movie, though it was clear she only enjoyed it because she was with him. Kondo suggested they head back, but Tachibana wanted to grab a drink with him. They went to the same cafe she had visited with Ryosuke, and were even served by the same waitress. Embarrassed, she tried to cover her face so she wouldn't be recognized. When their drinks arrived, she asked Kondo, "How many?" Kondo misunderstood, thinking she was asking how old he was, so he replied, 45. But she was actually asking how many sugar cubes he wanted, and she ended up adding, like, 7 cubes. That cup had more sugar than coffee. Kondo remembered his first date with a girl, where he had also ordered coffee. It was so bitter that while his date was in the bathroom, he loaded it with sugar. The memory made him notice how many young couples were at the cafe. All around him were young couples, and there he was with a 17-year-old girl. He suddenly felt uncomfortable and decided it was time to go, even though they hadn't finished their drinks. He quickly paid the bill, and Tachibana asked the waitress if she could take the receipt with her. They walked across a bridge, and while Kondo was on a work call, Tachibana admired the view. When he hung up, he saw her standing there, looking so young, and he felt awful, realizing just how old he was in comparison. When she rejoined him, he told her he had to head back to the restaurant, realizing it wasn't just about what others thought, but that he didn't want to hurt himself either. As Tachibana walked ahead of him, he assumed she hadn't enjoyed the date because, after all, it was a date with an old guy. But at the station, she thanked him for the date, and as he was about to leave, she thought about giving him a kiss on the cheek, at least in her mind, but she couldn't bring herself to actually do it. When Tachibana finally got home, her mom asked her why she had gone to see the same movie twice. Turns out, the theater gives you a flyer for each movie you watch, and she had one from when she went with Ryosuke and another from today with Kondo. Her mom didn't know, so she mixed them up, and now she couldn't tell which one was from today because they looked the same. Back at work, Tachibana ran into Yuto, Kondo's son, or stepson, as she jokingly thought. He had brought a hamster that a friend gave him to show his dad, but unfortunately, today was his dad's day off. Yuto didn't really care, though, and was determined to take the hamster to his dad's place by himself since he knew where his dad lived. It was a bit risky for him to go alone, so Tachibana, who was finishing early that day, offered to go with him after work. They went to Kondo's apartment, yep, not a house, just an apartment, and Yuto knocked on the door. When no one answered, he tried to see if the door was open. It turned out to be unlocked, so Yuto was the first to go inside to look for his dad while Tachibana stayed by the door, neatly arranging the shoes, a little detail she found charming. Yuto called her into his dad's room, but Kondo wasn't home. As she looked around, she found a book titled How to Be a Nicer Boss and another one on magic tricks. Instantly, she remembered the trick Kondo performed when they first met. She kept looking around his study until Yuto interrupted her, complaining that he was hungry. She had no choice but to make something for him. She ended up making miso soup. Meanwhile, Kondo, who had gone to the store to buy some food, was on his way back. Yudo noticed his dad was coming home and decided to surprise him by hiding Tachibana. When Kondo arrived, he was shocked to see Yudo had come all by himself, and even more surprised that they had made miso soup. Tachibana overheard the conversation from her hiding spot, and Kondo asked if he could try some of the miso. When he did, he said it was a bit salty, which embarrassed her. Kondo then chatted with his son, who teased him for being picky about food when he wasn't home. They continued talking about their summer plans. Yudo said he would be doing radio calisthenics, while Kondo said he'd be working most of the time, but on his days off, maybe he'd read some books. Kondo also mentioned that he recently watched a movie for the first time in a while, which made Tachibana incredibly happy, though Yudo didn't notice her reaction. Then, Yudo remembered the hamster and brought out the box he had it in, asking his dad to take care of it. Kondo explained he couldn't because he was too busy with work. Yudo was disappointed, saying his mom wouldn't let him keep it, but if his dad took it, he could come visit the hamster. He was on the verge of tears, so Kondo said he'd think about it. Meanwhile, Tachibana, who was still hiding, started to feel overheated and couldn't take it anymore. She stumbled out of her hiding spot, struggling to breathe because she had been stuck in that hot space for too long. Kondo panicked and asked Yudo to bring her some barley tea, which he did. But as Yudo handed her the tea, he accidentally spilled it on her, leaving her more exposed than she'd like. Kondo lent her one of his shirts to cover up, which, despite the situation, Tachibana secretly enjoyed. The next issue was cleaning her shirt. Kondo realized he couldn't wash it with his laundry, so he took it to the laundromat, leaving Tachibana and Yudo alone again. Before leaving, he told Yudo to apologize to her. Tachibana didn't mind at all because now she got to wear one of Kondo's shirts. While at the laundromat, Kondo finally asked himself why she had been in his apartment in the first place. Once her shirt was clean, Kondo got stuck at the laundromat because of the rain. But then Tachibana and Yudo showed up, bringing him an umbrella. They looked like such a cute little family, except, of course, Kondo could easily be her father. On the way home, under the rain, Tachibana told Kondo she wanted to know more about him. Kondo, caught off guard, didn't know what to say. She was serious, but he couldn't believe it. He then mentioned that taking care of a hamster was a big responsibility. Back at work, Kondo was thinking about what Tachibana had said during their date. He had assumed that after the date, she would forget about her feelings for him. But when she arrived at work, for the first time, Kondo felt nervous around her. As Tachibana was about to hand him a letter, Yui walked into the office, interrupting her. She started chatting with Kondo about her own experiences with hamsters and offered to answer any questions he had. Tachibana didn't get a chance to give Kondo the letter she had been waiting to hand him. Then, Takashi came in with some hamster food, as he also knew about taking care of them. Pretty soon, the whole staff was talking to Kondo about hamsters. Kondo realized that he didn't need a book to be a better boss. But then, when Tachibana asked Yui what she had said to Kondo, Yui misunderstood, thinking Tachibana was referring to her earlier comment about Kondo's smell. She explained that she had been talking more with Kondo but was breathing through her mouth to avoid smelling him. Kondo overheard this, and it made him feel even more self-conscious, though he didn't write it down like he usually did. He sensed that something had changed within him. Later, at work, Tachibana noticed that everyone, except Ryosuke, was gathered around Kondo, chatting away happily. She couldn't take it anymore and shouted at everyone to stop talking about the hamster and get back to work. Everyone realized that it had indeed gone too far, as if they were beating a meme to death. They went back to work, finally leaving Kondo alone. Tachibana seized the moment and told him that if he had any questions about the hamster, he should come to her. Kondo was impressed and said he would. Feeling good about it all, Tachibana handed him the letter, which detailed everything he needed to know about caring for a hamster. After that, she remembered that Kondo liked reading, but she didn't know what kind of books he was into. So, she went to a bookstore to pick out something that might be to his taste, thinking maybe it should be some classic literature. At the bookstore, Haruka spotted Tachibana, and her brother asked her if she was going to say hi since it had been a while. Hearing that they weren't on bad terms, he suggested she go greet her. But just as Haruka was about to approach Tachibana, Yui showed up, as they had planned to meet that day. Noticing that Tachibana wasn't alone, Haruka decided to continue on her way without saying anything. Haruka couldn't help but notice that Tachibana had made new friends. They used to be very close because they competed in the same sport and were in the same club. But after Tachibana's injury, she carried on with her regular student life, while Haruka spent more time with the girls from the track team, whom Tachibana tried to avoid. Tachibana had become more focused on what was going on with Kondo, which led to their lives drifting apart, and they were no longer the close friends they once were. On the other hand, one day while Tachibana was waiting at the usual bus stop, she overheard some girls talking about a keychain that supposedly brought you closer to the person you liked. Apparently, it worked. So, Tachibana went to a vending machine that sold those keychains and managed to get one. But it wasn't the special one she wanted, the rare one that was much harder to get. Determined, she kept trying until she almost emptied the machine. Just then, Haruka walked by and saw her grabbing tons of keychains. She came over and asked how long Tachibana planned to keep trying. In the end, Tachibana ended up with a bunch of them and even gave some of the extras to Haruka. They ended up taking the same bus, and Haruka wanted to say something about their friendship, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Both girls headed to school, where Tachibana was planning to attend her modern Japanese class. Before heading off, she wished Haruka good luck with her practice. During practice that day, Haruka ran her last lap with Tachibana in mind, remembering the days when they were kids, and Tachibana was always way faster. Haruka once asked her how she could run so quickly, and Tachibana replied that she just enjoyed how it felt to run. All she could hear was the wind. Haruka thought she understood what she meant, which made Tachibana happy to feel understood. The next day, as Tachibana waited at the bus stop again, Haruka called to her from further up the street to give her something. It was the special keychain Tachibana had wanted, along with a note that said their friendship wasn't just about the track. After reading the note, Tachibana looked around for Haruka, but she had hidden to avoid being seen. That day was a peaceful one for Tachibana. On her way home, she encountered an elderly man who, since it was raining, asked if she could walk him to a nearby building. She helped him, and that's where she stumbled upon a library. Inside, she found Kondo, who mentioned that he visited the library occasionally but never borrowed any books because he wasn't from the city. This was different for Tachibana, who lived nearby. Curious, she asked why he had come there, and Kondo excitedly responded that he was looking for a good book on classic literature. His enthusiasm got them shushed for being too loud in the library. Tachibana then asked him for a recommendation, but Kondo told her that people who weren't used to reading shouldn't ask for recommendations because if they didn't like the book, they might end up hating reading altogether. However, he did suggest that if she felt called to find a book, it was probably because it was the right one for her. He then encouraged her to pick something on her own. The library was full of books, but all Tachibana really wanted to know was what kind of books he liked. Still, she took his advice and started browsing. Kondo, meanwhile, thought that maybe the reason she asked for recommendations was because she wanted to learn more about him. But he quickly dismissed the thought. Later, he went to find her to let her know he was leaving. She said she would go with him, but before leaving, she offered to check out a book for him using her library card. He accepted and chose a book called The Window by the Waves by Shijiro. After checking out the books, they walked part of the way together before saying goodbye. Tachibana had chosen 2 books, one was a photo book about running, and the other was a novel, which she ended up reading more than the photo book. Back at work, Yui suggested to the staff that they create a group chat for everyone at the restaurant using Messenger. It was an idea a friend had given her, and since everyone thought it was useful, they agreed to set one up. The only problem was that Kondo still had a flip phone. Takashi and Tachibana both chimed in, saying it was still possible to include him, but everyone got discouraged at the thought of teaching him how to use a messaging app. Tachibana, as usual, disappeared right after this conversation. Like a ninja, someone joked, saying she reminded them of their dad. She had gone to the bathroom to finish cleaning up and was feeling pretty happy knowing that Kondo could now use an app to message her. The only issue left was teaching him how to use it. Later, in the office, Kondo was browsing Amazon, checking out the book he had borrowed from the library. Tachibana came in, thinking about how she could text him, but instead, she shifted the topic and mentioned that the book he recommended was really good. She then asked him what he thought about the book he had borrowed. Kondo said it was fine, mentioning that the book had been written by a friend of his. Tachibana thought it was amazing that he had such a talented friend, but Kondo replied that his friend was the amazing one, not him. Tachibana disagreed, pointing out that Kondo read a lot and explained books really well, but before she could finish, Kondo cut her off, saying she didn't really know him. The conversation ended with an awkward silence, and Ryosuke, sensing the tension, decided to eat his lunch elsewhere. The next day, before Tachibana headed to work, her mom, having seen on the news that a typhoon was coming, suggested she take the day off. But Tachibana insisted on going to work, remembering what had happened the previous day. When she arrived at the restaurant, she went straight to the office, but Kondo wasn't there. Kyoko told her that Kondo had caught a summer cold, one of those colds that hits you unexpectedly just when you're the busiest. Plus, Yui had the day off, so at least the bad weather would hopefully mean fewer customers. That day, Tachibana had to work extra hard, balancing her duties as a waitress while still thinking about Kondo. This distraction caused her to accidentally spill a customer's order, but thankfully, it wasn't a big deal, and she quickly fixed her mistake. After the lunch rush, things slowed down, thanks to the typhoon. Kyoko allowed Tachibana to take a break, so she went to the office and laid her head on the table, replaying in her mind how Kondo had said she didn't really know him. A few minutes later, Ryosuke came in for his break, clearly stressed. He told Tachibana that she shouldn't chase after Kondo too much, maybe he had his own problems, and perhaps she was paying too much attention to him. Ryosuke warned her that she could end up losing something she cared about again, hinting at her past with running. The rest of the day was rough due to the typhoon. Kondo was still at his apartment, recovering from his cold. There was a knock at his door, and he wondered who would be visiting during such awful weather. Thinking it might be a door-to-door salesperson, he pretended not to be home, but the knocking continued. Finally, he opened the door, only to find Tachibana standing there in the middle of the storm. The weather was chaotic outside, and he immediately let her in, but he couldn't help but wonder, what on earth was a high school girl doing at his place during a typhoon? Kondo didn't understand why Tachibana had come to his place and asked if something had happened at the restaurant. She told him that it wasn't about the restaurant, she wanted to know more about him. Kondo immediately remembered what she had said the other day, and she explained that she really wanted to get to know him better. Kondo apologized for the situation, admitting that he wasn't anyone special. He always left things unfinished and didn't have anything to be proud of. He explained that he wasn't the adult she thought he was, but Tachibana insisted that he was wonderful. Kondo denied it again, saying that she was the one who was truly wonderful because she was young and full of life. She asked, "Then why does my heart hurt so much?" He started talking about how youth is often difficult, but the emotions she felt now would become very important in the future, even if she didn't fully understand them yet. She then asked him if her feelings for him were a burden and if she wasn't good enough. He quickly reassured her that it wasn't like that at all. Just as he was about to explain further, the power went out in his apartment. Despite the darkness, Kondo told her that being around her reminded him of good memories he had long forgotten. Upon hearing that, Tachibana began to cry out of sheer happiness. Seeing her like that, Kondo felt torn. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't leave her in such emotional turmoil. He wanted to comfort her, to free her from the anxiety she was feeling. Slowly, he moved closer and gently hugged her, thinking that maybe, just for a moment, this feeling was what people called love. He whispered that, just for an instant, he wanted to close the umbrella and feel the rain, an emotion that made him feel young again. For that brief moment, he wanted her to feel that her feelings were reciprocated. Tachibana hugged him back, simply because it felt right. It didn't need to be explained, she liked him. But when Kondo realized what he was doing, he quickly pulled away. Just then, the power came back on, and Kondo took the opportunity to clarify that he could only hug her as a friend. Right after saying that, Kondo collapsed to the floor, still weak from his cold. He eventually recovered and returned to work, but now Tachibana was the one who had caught a cold. No one really knew what had happened to her, as she rested in bed, thinking about how Kondo had put her in a taxi that day to send her home. What she remembered most, though, was the feeling of being loved, even if it was just for a moment. Then, she remembered that Kondo had said they would only be friends. By the time she recovered, she returned to work, but things between her and Kondo remained strictly friendly, at least that's how Kondo tried to keep it. He repeatedly told her they were just friends, though he couldn't say the same to Takashi. Kondo realized that a manager and an employee couldn't really be friends, and as he pointed out that Takashi's hair was too long for working in a restaurant, he joked that Takashi might get fired before they could become friends. During one of Tachibana's breaks, she found herself thinking about what Kondo had said during her visit to his apartment. Just then, Yui entered the break room, noticing a pimple on Tachibana's face. "Oh no! Call the ambulance." Well, maybe that's a bit of an overreaction, but it's typical teenage stuff. Yui offered her something to help with it. Then, out of nowhere, a sad-looking Takashi entered the office, complaining about how Kondo had told him his bangs were too long. Yui, who was learning how to cut hair because she wanted to become a hairstylist, offered to help him after their shifts. Once Takashi left, Yui asked Tachibana if she and Takashi were friends. Tachibana compared her relationship with Takashi to what she had with Kondo and replied that they were just acquaintances, which made Yui happy. Yui then asked if Tachibana liked anyone. Caught off guard, Tachibana quickly apologized, but Yui reassured her that she just wanted to become better friends with her. Yui also mentioned that this was the first time she and Takashi had really spent any time together, and she was curious if anything might develop between them. Tachibana, being an expert in forbidden love, encouraged her, saying that friendship could often turn into romance. Deep down, she couldn't help but think about her own situation. Both girls felt hopeful about the possibilities, knowing that friendships often blossom into love out of nowhere. Yui asked Tachibana to keep it a secret, and once their conversation ended, Tachibana returned to her shift, feeling grateful for Yui's trust. As she left the office, she bumped into Kondo, who was pointing to a poster he had put up on the wall. He mentioned that if she had free time, she should go to the summer festival being held nearby. Kondo always insisted that people go to the festival, and the idea stuck with Tachibana, making her realize that summer was slipping away. She found Kondo later and casually mentioned that friends often send each other text messages. Since they were friends, she suggested they exchange messages, keeping it purely platonic. Later, she noticed Yui happily cutting Takashi's hair in the back, and they looked like a couple, even though they weren't. Seeing them so happy made Tachibana feel content, and she was glad she had finally gotten Kondo's contact information. Even though they were just friends for now, she was certain that someday they could become something more. In another part of town, Haruka ran into Yamamoto, the former captain of the soccer team. Yes, former, he wasn't a player anymore, not because of drama, but because he supposedly had exams coming up. He asked Haruka what had happened to her friend, the one she used to always hang out with. Haruka thought he was mocking her for no longer being close with Tachibana, so she walked away. But that wasn't why he had asked. Realizing that Yamamoto had also injured his knee, she finally opened up and told him about what had happened to her friend, the injury that had forced her to quit the track team. The same thing had happened to Yamamoto, but Haruka still thought their situations were different. She believed Tachibana still wanted to run, though she wasn't sure, and that made her worry about her friend. Yamamoto told Haruka that Tachibana probably did want to run again but was likely avoiding it to prevent another injury. Being the star of the track team, people had high expectations for her, so she probably chose to focus on studying instead. Yamamoto added that her friend was lucky to have someone who cared about her and advised Haruka to be there for her and cheer her up. This conversation helped Haruka feel a little better. Meanwhile, Tachibana was at work, sitting in the office doing her summer homework. She was just about to put some hand cream on when Kondo walked in. He asked if she was working on her homework, and seeing that she was, he commented on how responsible she was. When he asked what the assignment was about, she told him it was based on a book called Rackham, which happened to be the same book he was reading. As Kondo looked at her, he noticed that she had a pimple on her face, but rather than mentioning it, he walked over to the window and started talking about the book. He remembered every paragraph by heart and asked her what part she was struggling with. It wasn't that she didn't understand it, she just didn't know how to answer one of the questions. The question was, what did you think of the servant's actions? Kondo told her it was a bad question because it was too subjective and would depend on the person answering. But he reassured her that this question wouldn't affect her grade, which made Kondo relax a bit. He began recounting the story to her, explaining that it was about a servant who found an old woman in a tower, pulling hair from corpses to make wigs to sell. The servant, seeing the logic in what she was doing, decided he would rather become a thief than starve to death. The servant was convinced that this was the path to a virtuous life. Tachibana asked Kondo if there was a sequel to the story, but there wasn't. The author wrote at the end that no one knew what happened to the servant, only that he ran off to the city to commit a robbery. Kondo admitted that he didn't really know what the author was trying to say with that ending. Then, Tachibana asked him what he would do if he were the servant. Kondo replied that he wouldn't be able to become a thief, probably because now he was too old and cautious to take risks. He figured he would have just stayed in the tower until the rain stopped, though he doubted he'd even move once the rain let up. He returned the question to Tachibana, but she found it difficult to answer, so he told her not to worry about it. While flipping through the book, Kondo noticed that Tachibana had written her name in it. He remembered the pimple the servant had, which was a symbol of youth, and reflected on how, as someone in middle age, he could no longer get pimples. He also lacked the courage and energy to change his mindset. It seemed that the keychain Tachibana had gotten, the one that supposedly brought people closer to their crush, was actually working. Not that he believed in such things, but maybe he should get one, just in case. When Tachibana turned in her homework, her teacher laughed at how interesting her response was. The next day, when she returned to work, her pimple had disappeared, but now Kondo had one. That evening, as Tachibana waited at the station, she remembered the summer festival and wondered if she should invite Haruka. Without thinking too much about it, she called her, and the two of them went to the festival together. In her homework answer, Tachibana had written that she hoped the servant's decision would change him for the better and that she wished one day to read a sequel to the story. At the festival, Tachibana met up with Haruka, who hadn't come alone. But it wasn't a problem, after all, her companions were her adorable twin sisters. Haruka's brother was also there, and since the twins needed to use the restroom, he took them instead of Haruka. But not without asking for 500 yen in return. Hey, money doesn't grow on trees. After they left, Tachibana and Haruka went to one of the festival games, where you try to fish out balloons with a hook. As they played, Haruka recalled the memories of how they used to spend summer together. Both of them went for a balloon of the same color, and as they played, Haruka thanked Tachibana for inviting her. Tachibana smiled, mentioning that this was the first time Haruka had gone out since quitting the track team. At least, both girls were happy now, even though neither of them made it to the preliminaries of the tournament. But the happiest one in that moment was Tachibana, because off in the distance, she spotted Kondo. He had come to the festival with Yudo. Haruka, seeing the way Tachibana looked at Kondo, wondered who he was. When she found out he was her boss, Haruka asked directly, "Do you like him?" Tachibana's reaction said it all. Haruka was shocked. Kondo was older, and he had a child. She couldn't believe her friend had a crush on someone like him. Haruka even teased her, calling her a cradle robber who preferred older men with gray hair. Embarrassed, Tachibana tried to drop the subject, but Haruka threw a fit, upset that her friend never told her anything. Haruka complained that she didn't know what was going on in Tachibana's life, which led to a full-blown argument. Tachibana snapped back, saying Haruka should have asked sooner, while Haruka retorted that she had no idea how to approach her about it. Their argument reached a climax just as Haruka's twin sisters returned, and they started crying because the two were fighting. Tachibana told Haruka that there was no way things could ever go back to how they were before, and that made Haruka cry even more. Haruka left in tears, abandoning her siblings at the festival. Tachibana knew something had gone wrong that night. Later, she went to a bar where she met up with an old friend. There was a sign in the street that seemed to remind her of the book she had borrowed from the library. When she met with her old friend, he offered her food and a beer. It turned out that the book Tachibana had borrowed was written by him. Kondo was stunned to realize that his friend, Shijiro, was the author. Shijiro was excited to hear that Kondo had read his book, but when Kondo casually said it was pretty normal, Shijiro made a scene at first. Eventually, he showed Kondo a book they had written together in school, which brought back a lot of memories for Kondo, especially when he saw his ex-wife's name written in it. Kondo had written it back when he decided to stay behind and marry her during a trip they had taken, while Shijiro had debuted solo on that same trip. Shijiro mentioned that he knew Kondo still wrote, though Kondo admitted he only wrote a little and that no one around him knew about it. Shijiro encouraged him, telling him they could talk whenever Kondo wanted. The two spent the night drinking together. As they walked home, Shijiro whined about wanting to take a taxi, but he didn't want to leave Kondo alone. He kept asking if Kondo was still writing, and after a bit of back and forth, Shijiro ended up getting into a taxi anyway. But not before Kondo teased him about one of his books, which made Shijiro sulk like a child. Kondo reminded him that they were both adults now, to which Shijiro replied that no, they were still just classmates. Kondo was left with the desire to go back to those high school days. Meanwhile, when Tachibana returned to school after the festival, Haruka couldn't bring herself to look Tachibana in the eye and kept avoiding her. This really bothered Tachibana. At work, Kondo noticed she seemed down and, when he got the chance, asked her why. She confided that she had fought with a friend from her old track team and wasn't sure if things could ever be fixed between them. Kondo couldn't offer advice at that moment, but after her shift, he called her over to look at the moon. He told her that he had also lost touch with a friend from his high school club. After 10 years, they met again, and everything was back to normal, as if nothing had changed. He figured that maybe it was because they had both matured, but they were still the same friends deep down. Those words gave Tachibana hope. That night, she prayed to the moon, wishing that one day she and Haruka could be close again. Later, from her home, she looked up at the sky, remembering the night she said all those hurtful things to Haruka. Her mother noticed and asked if she had made a wish to the moon. Afterward, her mom asked her to throw away some old magazines, and in one of them, she saw an ad for a second-hand book fair. Tachibana took this opportunity to invite Kondo to go with her, using the excuse of getting a book recommendation from him as friends. At the book fair, Kondo introduced Tachibana to the owner of a second-hand bookstore he frequently visited. The owner initially thought Tachibana was Kondo's daughter, but she quickly clarified that they were just friends, something that raised an eyebrow given their age difference. Kondo tried to steer the conversation away from any misunderstandings. Meanwhile, Tachibana came across an old letter in one of the stalls, one that she really liked. When she asked if Kondo knew about the world's shortest letter, he told her the story of Victor Hugo, who had sent a single question mark to his publisher, asking how his book was selling. The publisher responded with an exclamation mark to show that it was selling well. But what did that have to do with anything? Kondo explained that Hugo and his publisher had so much trust in each other that they could communicate with just a single symbol. Moving away from the topic of letters, the bookstore owner suggested that Kondo might like some of the books on display, and he began browsing while Tachibana kept looking at the old letters. She found one she wanted to show him, but by the time she returned, Kondo was completely absorbed in a book. So, she left him to it for a moment. However, when she came back, he had vanished. The owner told her that Kondo had probably gone somewhere quiet to read. Tachibana thought about calling him but didn't want to interrupt, so instead, she sent him a message with just a question mark. He replied with an exclamation point. When she returned to the bookstore owner, he mentioned that Kondo was always getting emotional about books because he secretly wanted to be a novelist. Just then, Kondo came back, apologizing for taking so long, but Tachibana assured him it wasn't a big deal. They continued browsing, and Kondo tried to haggle with the bookstore owner for a cheaper price on a book, but the owner wouldn't budge. Instead, he offered to sell the book at full price with a free letter. Kondo accepted the deal, and Tachibana quickly picked a letter she liked. It read, "I hope we can meet again when the season ends." After they said their goodbyes, Tachibana liked a post from the track team's social media account, something Haruka had been checking all day, waiting for Tachibana's reaction. When Tachibana finally liked the post, Haruka responded too. After that outing, Tachibana visited the clinic to check on her leg. Her injury was healing, but she declined the rehab to rejoin the track team. The doctor noted that she didn't seem interested in returning. Meanwhile, Kondo, while at a local diner, saw an interview with Shijiro on TV. Shijiro was talking about how novels were like lovers, which left Kondo reflecting deeply on what that meant. Honestly, don't ask me either, I have no idea what Shijiro meant. Kondo began to think back to when he used to write novels day and night. Back then, he had a family he didn't spend much time with, which eventually led to emotional wounds. All of this resurfaced as he thought about Shijiro's words. At that moment, Tachibana showed him the book she had bought at the second-hand fair. Inside was an old bookmark with the image of a swallow. The image reminded Kondo of a nest outside the office that they had to destroy, but at least the birds were able to fly away, except for one. Tachibana asked what had happened to the last bird, and Kondo, after thinking for a moment, answered that it probably found happiness staying there, even if it couldn't fly away with the others. He joked that it might have just stayed behind, watching the sky forever. Though Kondo explained it as a joke, Tachibana enjoyed hearing his words and wished she could read them someday. Kondo didn't say much in response, but inside, it meant everything to him to hear someone say they wanted to read his words. Later, at the track team's practice, the girls were watching the news and saw that a runner from another school had just broken her record for the 100 meters. This runner had suffered the same injury as Tachibana, which got the girls wondering if Tachibana could break her own record if she ran again. Haruka, however, refused to accept that Tachibana couldn't do something another person had achieved. On her way home, Haruka learned that the runner had also set a new personal best, though Haruka thought her friends were exaggerating since the new record still didn't come close to Tachibana's personal best. As she was walking, Haruka spotted Tachibana in the distance and tried to catch up with her, but the traffic light turned red. And, well, in her own words, nobody really respects the red lights in third-world countries. Meanwhile, Tachibana had written down her new work schedule and handed it to Kondo. He was surprised to see that she wanted to work on Sundays as well, but before he could ask her why, he had to rush off to a meeting with the main office. He left the restaurant in the hands of the other employees, and just after he left, Haruka showed up at the restaurant. Coincidentally, Kondo had forgotten something in the office and came back to retrieve it, only to see Tachibana serving a customer from her school. The conversation the customer had was about how Tachibana should return to the track team, as her absence was causing the others to drift apart. Unable to continue the conversation, Haruka canceled her order and shared the story of the runner who had recovered from her injury. This left Tachibana deep in thought. Later, when she was walking through the library, she found out that Shijiro's book was being adapted into a movie, which she hadn't expected. She called him to congratulate him, but when she arrived home, Shijiro was already there, waiting for her. He had come to visit for no particular reason. They ended up making coffee from scratch and, for fun, tried to write a novel in under a minute. Both failed miserably, and they realized how much they had changed since high school when they could write anything just for the thrill of it. They talked a bit about literature. The real reason for Shijiro's visit was to reconnect with Kondo because fame had made it hard for him to complain about anything openly. Before producing more garbage, as he jokingly called it, he decided to visit his old friend. He also teased Kondo, saying that he probably didn't write like he used to, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to disappoint his younger self. Shijiro suggested that it was Kondo himself who wasn't letting himself move forward. At least, Shijiro said, he was living honestly, chasing the same dream. That night, after Shijiro left, Kondo sat at his desk and tried to write again, determined to keep pursuing that dream. Meanwhile, after Haruka's visit, Tachibana seriously thought about running again. The thought even crossed her mind while she was working. A little girl handed her a phone that a customer had left behind, but the customer was too far away, and Tachibana, hesitant to run because of her injury, let them go without chasing after them. Later that day, Kondo asked her if she was sure about the work schedule she had requested, hinting that she might want time for other things. Tachibana assumed he meant running, so she angrily shouted that she had nothing else to do, rejecting the idea of going back to running. As she walked home, she wondered if she had made the right decision. During this time, Kondo was staying up late, writing. Tachibana, on the other hand, continued attending school as usual. One day after class, she tore up her career choice form, the form where you write down what you want to do after graduation. She had planned to throw it away like a paper airplane, but couldn't bring herself to do it. At work, she overheard Takashi talking about career choices again. Kondo, who was on his way to the main office, remembered how Tachibana had said she didn't want to do anything else in her free time. When he said goodbye to her, he was so flustered that he ended up saying her name wrong. Later, Yui told Tachibana that she had also received a career choice form at her school, but unlike Tachibana, she knew exactly what she wanted to do, attend beauty school. Suddenly, Takashi asked Yui if she could cut his bangs again when she had the time. Yui was overjoyed because it was the person she liked who was asking her to cut his hair. That night, outside the office, they did it, the haircut for all you with dirty minds. While Yui was trimming his hair, Takashi asked her what made her decide to become a hairstylist. She replied that she wanted to make others happy by doing what she loved. But she couldn't bring herself to admit that the person who inspired her decision was him. When she expressed her doubts about whether she could actually become a hairstylist, Takashi reassured her that she could do it. He made her promise that on the day she made her debut as a hairstylist, she would cut his hair. This made her burst into tears. Later, after Tachibana's shift ended, she overheard that Kondo had returned from the main office. This could only mean one thing: he might be getting promoted and transferred to work at the main office permanently, with a new manager coming in to replace him at the location. The other employees didn't believe it, though. That night, Kondo arrived home and went straight to writing. Meanwhile, Haruka was reminded, as she watched a group of young girls, of how she and Tachibana were when they first visited the school together. At work, Tachibana ran into Yuto in the office. He asked her how she had injured herself, and she explained that she used to do track and field. Intrigued, Yuto asked if she was a fast runner, and when she said she was, he begged her to teach him how to run like her. They went outside, and Yuto ran back and forth, eventually falling, but he refused to take a break. He said that if he was going to run, he wanted to cross the finish line, even if he was last. He didn't want to give up, because giving up meant failing, at least according to his father. Yuto's words gave Tachibana a surge of motivation, and she started teaching him how to run properly, remembering how Haruka used to run. Later, Tachibana bumped into Kondo, who thanked her for teaching Yuto how to run. She mentioned that Yuto had made a promise to run until he crossed the finish line, and Kondo remembered that because it was a promise he himself had forgotten. But now, he had made a new promise: to live through literature. Though writing was still a challenge for him, he was enjoying it again. Before leaving, Tachibana handed Kondo her new work schedule, just as she had requested. She hinted that maybe he, too, had forgotten a promise he once made. When she got home, she pulled out some old things she had saved, including the school magazine from when she visited with Haruka. Inside it was also a guide to rehabilitation for her injury. The next day, Kondo explained to the staff why he had been going to the main office. It turned out that it wasn't for a promotion, he had been taking a test for something they were adding to the menu, but he had failed. Their restaurant would be the only one not rolling out the new menu just yet. After apologizing for that, Kondo prepared to head back to the office, but he forgot the file he needed. Since he had already left, Tachibana had to chase after him. As she ran, she remembered one of her races, where she got back up and finished the race by crossing the finish line even though she was injured. She found Kondo at the bus stop and handed him the file. Kondo asked if her injury was fully healed, and when she confirmed it was, he was about to say something to her, but his phone rang, another call from the main office. As he took the call, Tachibana turned to head back to the restaurant, but just before she left, Kondo called her back. In her mind, she imagined running toward him and hugging him, but that was just a fleeting fantasy. In reality, Kondo told her that when they both fulfilled their promises, they would let each other know right away. Later, Tachibana sent a message to Haruka, saying, "Let's feel the wind together again." Haruka, of course, was overjoyed. Both Kondo and Tachibana silently promised themselves that they would never forget. No matter where they were or how much time passed, they would always remember the people who taught them about their future. They vowed that every time they looked at the sky after the rain, they would think of that person. And fittingly, that was the title of Kondo's book, After the Rain Star. Thank you for joining us on this journey through After the Rain. We hope this summary has captured the essence of Akira and Kondo's heartfelt story. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more anime summaries and discussions. Until next time, keep exploring the wonderful world of anime.